I had been working since I was 16. I never once asked my parents for money, yet I managed to pay for my entire education by myself. I even bought my first house on my own. But instead of celebrating this milestone, I was sued by my own parents, who claimed I had stolen my sister's future. My name is Amanda. I'm 29 years old now, and ever since I turned 16, I've worked every job I could find to support myself. I paid my own way through college, cleared out all my student loans, and eventually saved enough for a down payment on a small house. That moment, receiving the keys to my first home, should have been the proudest day of my life. But instead of joy, I found myself staring at a stack of court papers. My parents were suing me for 70% of the home's value. They claimed that I had robbed my younger sister Emma of her future by buying a house for myself. If you're watching this, please take a moment to drop a comment and let me know where you're tuning in from. Hit that like button and subscribe, because what I'm about to share is how the proudest achievement of my life became its most painful betrayal. I grew up in a family of 4 in a modest suburb of Minneapolis. My father, John, worked as an insurance adjuster. My mother, Karen, held a part-time job as a receptionist at a dental office. Then there was me and my younger sister Emma, who's 8 years younger than I am. From the outside, we probably looked like your average middle-class American family. But behind closed doors, money was always a point of tension. Arguments about bills and finances filled the house constantly. I remember seeing bills pile up on the kitchen counter and hearing my parents' hushed conversations about money abruptly stop whenever I walked into the room. Even though both my parents had steady jobs, we always seemed to be living paycheck to paycheck. Looking back now, I realize that the root of the problem wasn't necessarily a lack of income. It was poor financial management. What hurt the most, though, wasn't the instability or the stress. It was the difference in how my parents treated me and Emma. From the very beginning, they decided that Emma was the special one. She had potential, talent, a bright future. They'd say things like, "Emma has natural talent," or "Emma could really be somebody someday." When it came to me, the message, though never explicitly spoken, was clear. I was just ordinary. I wasn't worth investing in. By the time I was 14, I had internalized that message. I became the practical one, the responsible one. That's when I started helping our elderly neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, after school. I'd vacuum, dust, and organize her medications. She paid me $10 an hour, and that became my first real experience with financial independence. With that money, I bought school supplies, my own clothes, and even the occasional ice cream trip with friends. My parents never asked where I got those things. If anything, they seemed relieved that they didn't have to provide them. When I turned 16, I applied for my first job at Sweet Dreams Bakery, just 6 blocks from our house. I'd walk there right after school, work until 7:30 in the evening, then come home and start my homework. The owner, Diane, was a kind woman who quickly became a mentor to me. She didn't just teach me how to bake. She taught me about customer service, managing inventory, and saving money. The day I received my first paycheck was both exciting and sobering. I had dreamed of opening a savings account, hoping to start setting money aside for college and my future. But that dream was immediately interrupted when my father sat me down at the kitchen table. "Now that you're earning money," he said, sliding a calculator toward me, "you need to contribute to the household. 30% of your earnings should go toward rent, food, and utilities." I stared at him in disbelief. "But, Dad, I'm only 16. Shouldn't I be saving for college?" From the doorway, my mother laughed. "Amanda, be realistic. With your grades, you'd be better off learning a trade. Besides, Emma will need a college fund. She actually has a future." That 30% rule stayed in effect all throughout my high school years. I never once missed a payment. Meanwhile, I watched my sister receive gift after gift. Emma had piano lessons that cost $200 a month. She took ballet classes 3 times a week. Her room got a complete makeover with beautiful new furniture, while I still slept in the same childhood twin bed. My routine became exhausting, but it was consistent. School from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m., work from 3:30 to 7:30. Homework that often kept me up until midnight or later. Weekends were double shifts at the bakery. Summer breaks weren't vacations for me, they were just more work. I never had time to enjoy the typical freedoms of being a teenager. And on the rare occasion I bought something new for myself, that didn't go unnoticed. "Another new shirt, Amanda?" My mother would remark disapprovingly. "You should be more responsible with your money." This coming from the woman who had just spent $300 on a special ballet costume for Emma. In my junior year of high school, I picked up a second job on weekends at the local library. I told my parents it was for extra spending money, but the truth was I had a plan. I was secretly building a college fund. The library job didn't pay as well as the bakery, but it offered something just as valuable: quiet hours to study during slow times. With the extra study time, my grades started to improve significantly. Mrs. Peterson, my elderly neighbor who had become something like a grandmother to me, noticed how tired I was one day when I came to help her. She handed me a cup of hot chocolate and said gently, "Amanda, dear, you're working yourself to the bone. What are you saving for that's worth so much sacrifice?" I told her everything, and when she heard it, tears welled in her eyes. "Your parents should be supporting your dreams, not the other way around," she said softly. After that, she insisted on paying me extra for my help, making me promise to put the extra money directly into my college savings. By the time I reached my senior year, I had maintained a 3.8 GPA despite the long work hours and exhaustion, and I had managed to save nearly $8,000 for college. My guidance counselor, who had taken a quiet interest in my future, helped me apply for scholarships and financial aid. She believed in me, even when my own family didn't. When college acceptance letters started rolling in, my parents didn't seem proud. They seemed annoyed. "College is expensive," my father warned. "Don't come crying to us when you can't afford it." I looked him straight in the eye and replied, "I won't. I never have." When I got accepted to State University with a partial academic scholarship, I was both thrilled and terrified. The scholarship covered about 60% of my tuition. That left 40%, plus housing and meals that I somehow had to figure out. My $8,000 savings? It would barely cover my first year. Still, I was proud. I wanted to share the news, hoping, just maybe, my parents would be too. One night at dinner, I told them. "State University?" my father muttered, barely glancing up from his plate. "That's expensive for what it is." I said calmly, "I'm not asking for help. I have my scholarship and savings. I'll figure the rest out." My mother sighed loudly. "I don't understand why you need to go at all. You've got a perfectly good job at the bakery. Diane would probably make you assistant manager if you stayed." "Because I want more than that, Mom. I want a career, not just a job." That's when my father cut in. "And what about your contribution to this household? How are we supposed to make up that shortfall?" That moment opened my eyes. The 30% rule hadn't been about teaching me discipline. They had been relying on my income to support the household, so Emma could pursue her dreams. I wasn't their daughter on the path to independence. I was their financial support system. "I'm sorry," I said firmly, "but I'm going to college. I've worked too hard for this, and I'm not giving it up." The weeks leading up to my departure for college were filled with cold shoulders and passive-aggressive remarks. My parents behaved as if I were betraying the family instead of pursuing a better future. Only Emma seemed genuinely happy for me, though at 11 years old, she couldn't fully grasp the tension surrounding my decision. Move-in day arrived, and unlike most students, I experienced it completely alone. My parents claimed they couldn't take time off work to help me settle in, so I packed everything I could fit into a few suitcases and took the bus to campus. No send-off, no goodbyes. When I got to my dorm, my roommate Jennifer was already there, surrounded by her entire family. They were setting up her side of the room with matching bedding, decorative pillows, framed photos, all the small details that make a place feel like home. I quietly unpacked my secondhand sheets and a single photo of Emma and me, placing it on my desk in silence. That first night, lying in bed while Jennifer talked on the phone with her parents about how much she missed them, I cried into my pillow. Not because I missed home, but because I was finally starting to understand how abnormal my relationship with my family really was. College life hit me hard. Even with the scholarship, the financial pressure was immense. Within my first week on campus, I found a job as a server at a local restaurant. The hours were brutal, 5 to 11 p.m. on weeknights, which meant going straight from class to work, then staying up late to study. Weekends were worse, double shifts that left me so drained I rarely had the energy to socialize. But I pushed through. In my sophomore year, I picked up a second job as a teaching assistant for an introductory business course. The pay was minimal, but it helped build my resume and gave me valuable experience. Between the restaurant and TA work, I managed to avoid taking on too many loans, though I still had to borrow about $10,000 a year. My dorm room became both my sanctuary and my prison. I often studied under the glow of a small desk lamp until 3 or 4 in the morning. Cup noodles became my staple, not because of the stereotype, but because they cost less than $1 per meal. I tracked every penny with a detailed budget spreadsheet, calculating exactly how many hours I needed to work each week to survive. Eventually, Jennifer moved out. She said my late-night studying and early alarms disrupted her sleep. She was replaced by Jessica, a scholarship student who also worked part-time. Unlike Jennifer, Jessica understood. She got it, and we became fast friends. My parents help when they can, but there are 5 kids in my family, she shared one night. I'm kind of the experiment. First one to go to college. At least they support you emotionally, I replied. I didn't mean to sound bitter, but I did. Jessica looked at me thoughtfully. Your family situation sounds really toxic, Amanda. Have you ever talked to someone about it? Like a therapist? I laughed. With what time? Or money? Therapy feels like a luxury I can't afford. Still, I kept going. My finance and business classes felt incredibly relevant. After all those years of managing a bare-bones budget, everything clicked. My professors noticed my drive, and one of them recommended me for a summer internship at Meridian Financial Services. That internship changed everything. For the first time, I was working in a professional setting where my ideas and hard work were actually valued. My supervisor, Michael, appreciated my persistence and real-world experience. The pay was better than both my other jobs combined, and I used it to build a cushion for senior year. During all those years, my relationship with my parents remained distant. They rarely called unless it was about money. The pattern became predictable. A few minutes of small talk followed by some request. Amanda, Emma needs new point shoes, $200. The fridge broke. We need $440 for repairs. Emma got into a summer music camp. It's $2,000. Whenever I could, I sent what I could, telling myself it was for Emma, not them. But each time, I felt more like a wallet than a daughter. In my senior year, I met Tyler in an advanced finance seminar. He was intelligent, kind, and came from a supportive family, the kind of background I had only ever observed from a distance. When he invited me to spend Thanksgiving with his family, I agreed, not fully prepared for what I was about to experience. It was the first time I witnessed a family that genuinely enjoyed each other's company. Tyler's parents asked about my classes, my goals, my thoughts, and not just out of politeness. They seemed truly interested in me as a person, not as a source of income or obligation. Later that night, Tyler found me sitting alone in the guest room, silently crying. "Why are you crying?" he asked gently. "Because I didn't know families could be like this," I whispered. "I didn't know parents could love their children unconditionally." That weekend changed something deep inside me. I began to realize that the way my family operated wasn't just hard, it was unhealthy. And for the first time, I understood that I deserved better. I graduated with a bachelor's degree in finance and a minor in business administration. My GPA was 3.7, high enough to earn cum laude honors. No one from my family came to the ceremony. Emma had wanted to attend, but my parents said they couldn't afford the trip, even though it was only a 3-hour drive. Still, there was a silver lining. Michael, my internship supervisor, had been impressed enough to offer me a full-time job at Meridian Financial Services starting after graduation. The salary? $50,000 a year. To someone who had been scraping by for so long, it felt like a fortune. The first major decision I had to make was about housing. Most of my new coworkers were renting trendy apartments, spending 30 to 40% of their income on rent. I took a different path. I chose a tiny studio apartment in an older building, about 45 minutes from work by public transportation. The rent used up just 20% of my paycheck, allowing me to stay focused on bigger financial goals, paying off student loans and saving for a home. I made a 5-year financial plan. Year 1. Build an emergency fund and start student loan repayment. Years 2 through 4. Aggressively pay off loans and build a down payment fund. Year 5. Begin house hunting. Even with a professional salary, I kept my lifestyle frugal. I brought lunch to work, shopped at discount grocery stores, and continued riding public transportation. Friends often invited me out for happy hours or weekend trips, but I said no. A $60 dinner or $300 weekend getaway could delay my plan by months. Jessica and I stayed close. She had landed a teaching job at a local high school and shared my drive for financial independence. Most people our age aren't thinking about retirement accounts or mortgage rates. She laughed one night while reviewing my budget spreadsheet with me over a cheap pizza dinner. Most people our age didn't have to pay rent to their parents at 16, I replied. My relationship with Tyler also evolved. We went from classmates to friends and eventually to something more, but not without challenges. Tyler respected my goals but didn't always understand my relentless focus. You deserve to enjoy life now, not just plan for the future, he would argue during one of our many conversations about budgeting and priorities. I am enjoying life, I'd tell him. Financial stability means everything to me. Eventually, we decided, mutually, to remain just friends. It was painful, but necessary. My goals weren't up for compromise. At work, my effort didn't go unnoticed. 18 months in, I was promoted to financial analyst, and my salary increased to $62,000. Instead of upgrading my lifestyle, I funneled the extra income straight into student loan payments. By the end of my third year at Meridian, I had paid off all $40,000 of my student debt, built a $12,000 emergency fund, and started saving seriously for a down payment. But as I hit these milestones, I noticed something else, something more emotional. I had no one to truly share the joy with. My relationship with my family was still strained, reduced to the occasional call when they needed something. Emma was now in high school, thriving in music and academics. My parents spoke of her with the same dreamy admiration they always had, and predictably, the pressure on me to help fund her ambitions began to increase again. Emma's piano teacher thinks she could get into Juilliard, my mother said during one of our rare phone calls. Her voice carried pride and an unmistakable implication. Of course, the application process and audition prep will be expensive. The message was clear. They expected me to help pay. That year alone, I had already sent $3,000 to cover Emma's lessons, supplies, and other costs. I kept telling myself it was for her, not them. But the line between the two was starting to blur. "Mom," I said gently, "I have my own financial goals I'm working toward. I can't be Emma's college fund." The silence on the other end was icy. "I see," she said coldly. "So your sister's future means nothing to you now that you've got your fancy job and your city apartment." It was a familiar guilt trip, but this time I didn't bite. "That's not fair," I replied. "I've already helped a lot over the years, but I can't be expected to fund someone else's education when I just finished paying off my own." The call ended on a sour note. My mother accused me of changing, of becoming cold and selfish. 2 weeks later, my father called. This time, he skipped the guilt and went straight to business. "Emma got accepted to Westfield University," he said. "Tuition is $40,000 a year. We need to know how much you can contribute." Westfield was a prestigious private school known for its arts programs and its sky-high tuition. I was stunned, both by the assumption and the number. "Dad, that's over $160,000 total. I don't have that kind of money." "You make good money now," he said. "You could take out a loan to help your sister. That's what family does." The irony wasn't lost on me. "Family helps when they can," I said slowly. "No one helped me." "That was different. You were always independent." "I wasn't given a choice," I replied. The conversation spiraled into a mess of accusations and unresolved resentment. My father hung up after telling me I was breaking my mother's heart with my selfishness. As painful as it was, I stuck to my plan. I wasn't going to jeopardize everything I had worked for. Later, when Emma herself called to ask about college, I took a different approach. "I can't pay your tuition," I told her gently. "But I can help you apply for scholarships, research affordable schools, and teach you how to budget, how to be independent like I had to be." Her response took me by surprise. "I never asked them to put this on you, Amanda," she said softly. "I know how hard you worked for everything you have." It was the first real connection we'd had in years. We started talking more. I became a sounding board for her, an advisor instead of a checkbook. I helped her find scholarships and navigate financial aid. Eventually, she was offered a generous package from a state university, similar to the one I had attended. My parents were disappointed. They saw her decision as settling for less than she deserved. But I was proud. Still, the pressure didn't stop. My parents continued to push for more financial support, while I carefully earmarked money only for Emma's textbooks or dorm supplies. By my 5th year at Meridian, I had been promoted to senior financial analyst with a salary of $78,000. And finally, I had saved enough for a 20% down payment on a modest home. Years of sacrifice were finally about to pay off in the form of the stability I had dreamed of since I was a child. What I didn't expect was how my family would react to it. House hunting was both exciting and terrifying. I had very specific criteria: a small, well-maintained home in a safe neighborhood, close to public transportation, and priced under $250,000. My real estate agent, Natalie, was patient and encouraging as we spent 3 months touring dozens of properties. "Most first-time buyers your age are looking for condos or choosing to keep renting," she remarked one afternoon. "It's impressive that you're ready to buy outright." I smiled, letting the pride show for once. I've been working toward this since I was 16. Eventually, we found it. A cozy 1920s bungalow with 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a functional little kitchen, and a small backyard. The price was $220,000, within my budget. The inspection revealed no serious issues, and the location was ideal. Everything about it felt right. Signing the mortgage papers felt surreal. I had planned for this moment for years, but sitting there with a pen in hand, I could hardly believe it was actually happening. The loan officer glanced at my file and commented, "It's rare to see someone your age with such a solid financial foundation. Most people your age have limited credit and heavy student debt." "I paid off my student loans 3 years ago," I replied, trying not to let the pride burst out too loudly. The day I received the keys, I walked into the empty house and stood in the living room for a long time. Alone, quiet, overwhelmed. This house wasn't just an investment. It was proof. Proof that I had broken free from everything I grew up with. Proof that I could build a future on my own terms. Proof of security, of independence. Jessica and Tyler came to help me move in. They brought housewarming gifts and champagne, and we sat on the floor eating pizza because I hadn't bought furniture yet. "To Amanda," Jessica toasted, raising a plastic cup, "who worked harder than anyone I know to get here." "To having roots," Tyler added, "something you deserve more than anyone." A few weeks after moving in, I decided, perhaps naively, that it was time to invite my family over. Despite everything, I wanted to share this milestone with them. Maybe, just maybe, seeing my success would make them proud. They arrived one Saturday afternoon. My father gave the house a long look as he walked up the front path. His first comment upon stepping inside, "It's small." "It's the perfect size for me," I replied, trying to keep the tone light. My mother walked through the room slowly, her expression unreadable. She touched surfaces as if checking for dust, and finally muttered, "This neighborhood isn't very upscale, is it?" "It's safe and close to my office," I said simply. Emma, now in her 2nd year of college, seemed genuinely happy. "I think it's awesome, Amanda," she smiled. "You worked so hard for this." I had even prepared lunch, nothing fancy, but enough to create a warm atmosphere. I hoped it could be the beginning of a new chapter for us. For a little while, the conversation stayed light. We talked about nearby stores, traffic, commute times. Then my mother set down her fork and cleared her throat. "Emma has some news to share," she said. Emma looked down at her plate, clearly uncomfortable. I might have to take a break from school next semester." "What? Why?" I asked, immediately concerned. "My scholarship wasn't renewed," she said quietly. "And my student loan application got denied because of Dad's credit score. We've had some financial setbacks," my father added. "Medical bills, car repairs. You know how it is." I already knew where this was going. "So, what's the plan?" I asked, bracing myself. My mother leaned forward, her tone shifting. "Well, we thought now that you've just bought a house, you must be in a very comfortable financial position." "I just used all my savings for the down payment," I said flatly. "I'm not sitting on extra cash." "You could take out a home equity loan," my father suggested. "Emma needs about $20,000 for the year." I blinked. "I'm not borrowing against a house I just bought." "So you're just going to let your sister drop out of college?" my mother demanded. "After everything we've done for you?" I was speechless. Everything they'd done for me? "I've been working since I was 16, I said, trying to stay calm. "I paid for my own education. I bought this house on my own." "We raised you," my father shot back. "We put a roof over your head." "A roof I paid rent for as a teenager," I reminded them. The argument escalated quickly. My parents accused me of being selfish, of forgetting where I came from, of abandoning my family when they needed me most. I reminded them of the financial support I had already given over the years, the help I provided when I could, despite never receiving the same in return. I pointed out how unfair it was to expect me to mortgage my future for Emma's education. "You've always been jealous of the attention Emma got," my mother snapped. "This is your way of punishing her for being more talented." "This isn't about Emma," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "This is about boundaries and about having reasonable expectations." Emma, who had been quiet the whole time, finally spoke. "Please stop fighting. I'll figure something out. I can take a semester off and work full-time to save money." "Absolutely not," my mother snapped. "You are not throwing away your future because your sister is too selfish to help." I turned to Emma. "I can help you look into more scholarships or work-study programs. There are other ways. You don't have to go into massive debt or drop out." My father cut in. "The only alternative is for you to step up and do the right thing. Family takes care of family." "I've been taking care of this family financially since I was a teenager," I replied, exhausted. "And I'm done being your ATM." My father stood up abruptly. "If that's how you feel, maybe we need to reconsider what family even means." "You clearly have the money to help," my mother added, "but you're choosing not to." "This house represents years of sacrifice and hard work," I said. "I'm not jeopardizing that." Her voice turned icy. "That house should be helping secure Emma's future, not sitting here as a monument to your selfishness." As they prepared to leave, my father turned back one last time and said something I initially dismissed as dramatic. "This isn't over, Amanda. If you won't do the right thing voluntarily, there are other ways to make sure family obligations are met." I thought it was just another one of their threats, something said in anger, but I was wrong. 3 weeks later, I received a large envelope from the county court. Inside was a summons. My parents, John and Karen Collins, were officially suing me. The claim? That I owed them 70% of my home's value, about $154,000, to fund Emma's college education. The legal complaint argued that I had a moral and implied financial obligation to support my sister, and that my purchase of a home while refusing to help was equivalent to stealing her sister's future. Yes, that exact phrase was in the document. I sat on the floor of my living room, court papers scattered around me, too stunned to move. This couldn't be real. Parents don't sue their children. They don't drag their own daughter into court over money. But the official case number and court seal told me otherwise. With shaking hands, I called my parents, still hoping this was a misunderstanding, some twisted attempt to scare me. My father picked up on the fourth ring. "Dad, I just got court papers. Are you and Mom actually suing me?" "We're simply seeking what's fair," he said, his voice disturbingly calm. "You refused to help your sister voluntarily, so we're pursuing legal means." "This is insane. You can't possibly think a judge will make me give you money from my house." "Our lawyer thinks we have a case," he replied. "It's about family obligation and implied contract. You benefited from family resources growing up. Now you owe a return on that investment." The rest of the conversation felt like a surreal nightmare. My father spoke as if what they were doing was perfectly reasonable. "Dad, please. This will destroy whatever relationship we have left." "That's your choice, Amanda. Do the right thing, and we can move past this." When the call ended, I sat in silence for a long time before finally calling Jessica. She showed up 30 minutes later with a bottle of wine and determination in her eyes. "This can't be legal," she said, flipping through the documents. "They can't just demand part of your house." The next morning, I called in sick for the first time in my career. I needed a lawyer. By noon, I had an appointment with Linda Cohen, a family law attorney. Her office was warm and calm, a stark contrast to the chaos inside me. After reading the complaint, she looked at me with a mix of sympathy and professional focus. "In over 20 years of practice, I've seen some messy family cases," she said. "But parents suing their daughter over her own home? That's a first." "The good news is their case has virtually no legal merit," Linda said. "There's no legal principle that gives parents the right to their adult child's assets based on some implied obligation to a sibling." Relief washed over me, briefly. "But," she added, "just because the case is weak doesn't mean it won't cost you. Defending yourself still takes time, money, and emotional energy." We discussed next steps, what evidence I'd need, how much time I had to respond, and what the legal process would look like. Linda advised me to gather everything that showed I'd been financially independent for years. Tax returns proving I hadn't been claimed as a dependent since age 18, records showing I paid for my own education, and documentation of all the money I had already given to my family. Their entire argument hinges on the idea that you owe them something, she said. But if we show the court that, in fact, you've given far more than received, we'll undermine their entire narrative. The following weeks were a blur of legal paperwork, anxiety, and restless nights. My work suffered. I found it difficult to concentrate. Fortunately, my supervisor, Michael, noticed and pulled me aside. When I told him what was going on, he didn't hesitate. "Amanda, this isn't normal," he said plainly. "What your parents are doing, it's not just unfair, it's abusive." Hearing someone else call it out so clearly, especially someone I respected, hit me hard. I had spent so many years trying to normalize my family's behavior, blaming myself, excusing their choices. But Michael's words confirmed something I had only recently started to accept. My relationship with my parents wasn't just strained, it was toxic. Support began to come from unexpected places. Colleagues offered to cover shifts, brought me coffee, or simply listened. My neighbors, after overhearing bits and pieces, started dropping off meals when they knew I was buried in court prep. Even Tyler, despite the distance that had grown between us, reached out. He helped me organize financial records and sat with me when I didn't want to be alone. Jessica encouraged me to consider therapy. "This is trauma, Amanda. You need help unpacking it." She was right. I found Dr. Russell, a therapist who specialized in family estrangement and financial abuse. She offered sliding scale fees, making sessions affordable. "You were raised in a dynamic where your role wasn't to be nurtured. It was to provide," Dr. Russell said during one of our early sessions. "Children are not supposed to be financial assets." Her words stayed with me. She helped me see the patterns of guilt and manipulation that had been built into me since I was young. We began working on creating what she called internal boundaries, recognizing that just because someone made a demand didn't mean I owed them a response. Then, just a few days before our court date, I got a call I didn't expect. It was Emma. We hadn't spoken since the confrontation at my house. "Amanda," she said, her voice shaking, "I just found out about the lawsuit. I had no idea they were doing this. I never asked them to sue you." "You didn't know?" I asked, genuinely surprised. "No, I would never want that. I'm so sorry they're putting you through this." Her voice was sincere, and hearing it, it broke something open in me. Linda had told me this would be important, to separate how I felt about Emma from how I felt about our parents. Emma wasn't the one attacking me. She was just as caught up in the dysfunction, only in a different way. Still, I couldn't stop the nightmares. I dreamt of judges forcing me to hand over my house keys. I found myself constantly checking my bank account, calculating worst-case scenarios. Linda reassured me again and again. "Your parents don't have a legal case. They have anger and entitlement. But that doesn't hold up in court." Even so, the fear lingered. The emotional weight of being dragged into court by your own family over the home you worked your entire adult life to earn was heavy. My house, which once felt like a safe haven, now felt tainted. My parents, who should have been celebrating my achievement, were trying to take it away. As we prepared for court, Linda and I collected every piece of evidence we could. Bank statements showing over $15,000 sent to my family, tax returns, tuition receipts, rent payments from my teen years. Emma even provided a written statement saying she never asked for or expected me to pay for her education. "The facts are on your side," Linda reminded me. "The law is on your side, and tomorrow the court will be too." Rest, however, proved impossible the night before the hearing. I lay awake, dreading what it would feel like to sit in a courtroom across from the people who raised me. People now trying to take away the very thing that represented everything I had worked for. The thought of having our family dysfunction documented in court records, made public and formal, was overwhelming. I knew this might be the moment when the fragile, strained tie between us would be cut for good. The county courthouse was an imposing stone building. Its gray walls seemed to press down on me as I arrived early with Linda. I wore a navy suit and low heels, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. We took our place at the defendant's table. Linda neatly arranged our folders and whispered, "Speak only when the judge addresses you. If you want to respond to something, write it down and pass it to me." I've got this." Then my parents walked in. They were with their attorney, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and a permanent scowl. Neither of my parents acknowledged me as they sat down at the plaintiff's table. My mother stared straight ahead, cold and rigid. My father leaned in and whispered something to their lawyer. It was surreal, being so physically close, yet emotionally a universe apart. The judge, Harriet Wilson, entered shortly after. She looked to be in her 60s, with silver hair and a firm but calm presence. After quick introductions, she opened the file, furrowed her brow, and looked at both sides. "I've been on this bench for 17 years, she said slowly, peering over her glasses. "And I must say, this is one of the more unusual family disputes I've seen." She turned to my parents. "Mr. and Mrs. Collins, you are suing your daughter for 70% of the value of her home to pay for her younger sister's college tuition. Is that correct?" Their lawyer stood. "Yes, Your Honor. My clients believe their eldest daughter has a moral obligation to support her sister, particularly given the financial support she received while growing up." The judge's face remained neutral, but her tone shifted. "Moral obligations and legal obligations are not the same," she said pointedly. "Counselor, please explain the legal basis for your claim." What followed was a long, convoluted argument about implied contracts and reciprocal obligation. Claims that because I had benefited from my parents' care as a child, I now owed financial support in return. Linda stayed calm, taking notes and occasionally squeezing my arm whenever something especially ridiculous was said. When it was her turn, she stood with confidence and clarity. "Your Honor," she began, "this case has no grounding in family or contract law. Miss Collins was a minor child, receiving care her parents were legally required to provide. There was no agreement, expressed or implied, that she would pay them back." She then laid out our evidence: tax returns proving I hadn't been a dependent since age 18, receipts for my college tuition, and bank statements showing I had already given my parents and sister over $15,000 since turning 18. "Far from being a financial burden," Linda said firmly, "Miss Collins has been a consistent source of financial support to her family, support she was under no legal obligation to give." The judge examined the documents carefully. "Mr. and Mrs. Collins, were you aware of these financial contributions?" My father shifted in his seat. "Those were gifts, not related to this case." $15,000 in gifts seems rather generous," Judge Wilson replied, "especially considering you've characterized your daughter as selfish and unwilling to help." My mother finally spoke. "That money is nothing compared to what Emma needs. Amanda just bought a house. She clearly has money she's not sharing." The judge turned to me. "Miss Collins, what is your current financial situation?" Linda gave me a nod. I explained, briefly but honestly, how I'd saved for years, budgeted tightly, and was now managing a mortgage. "I'm not wealthy, Your Honor," I said. "I worked multiple jobs to get through college, paid off my student loans, and saved for years to afford this house. I can't pay for someone else's education without giving all that up." Judge Wilson nodded thoughtfully before turning back to my parents. "Mr. and Mrs. Collins, what financial planning did you do for your younger daughter's education?" My parents glanced at each other. There was a long pause before my father spoke. "We assumed scholarships would cover most of it. Emma is very talented." "And did you have the same expectation for your older daughter's education?" the judge asked. My mother responded quickly with a dismissive tone. "Amanda was always independent. She made her own way." "Because I was given no choice," I blurted out, immediately regretting the interruption. Judge Wilson glanced at me but didn't scold me. Instead, she returned her attention to my parents. "Did you contribute financially to Miss Collins's college education?" "We couldn't afford to at the time," my father replied. "And yet now you expect her to fund her sister's education in full?" The tone in the judge's voice was unmistakably skeptical. The rest of the proceedings continued, with more testimony about our family dynamics, our financial history, and the expectations my parents had always placed on me. Their attorney tried to frame the issue as a simple case of fairness, a family disagreement that the court should resolve by enforcing a reasonable obligation between siblings. Linda countered with clarity and precision, emphasizing that adult children have no legal responsibility to financially support their siblings, no matter how morally right the parents may believe it to be. Then, in a surprising moment, the back door of the courtroom opened. Emma walked in quietly and took a seat in the back row. Our eyes met for a moment. There was no anger in her expression, only something that looked like shame and courage. After final statements were made, Judge Wilson called for a 15-minute recess to review the evidence before delivering her ruling. As everyone stood to stretch, Emma approached our table. "Can I speak to the judge?" she asked quietly. Linda looked at her surprised and asked, "About what?" "I want her to know I never asked for any of this. I never wanted Amanda to pay for my education like this." Linda nodded slowly. "She may or may not allow it. Stay close in case the judge calls you." When the recess ended and court resumed, Judge Wilson shocked everyone by asking Emma to come forward. "You're Emma Collins," she said. "The younger sister whose education is central to this case?" "Yes, Your Honor," Emma replied nervously. "Do you wish to make a statement?" "Yes, I want to make it clear. I didn't ask my parents to sue my sister. I didn't even know they were doing this until recently. I would never want Amanda to be forced to pay for my education, especially not by giving up her home, which she worked so hard for." My mother made a small sound of protest, but Judge Wilson silenced her with a look. Emma continued, her voice gaining strength. "Amanda has always helped me. She helped me apply for scholarships, fill out financial aid forms, and taught me how to manage money. Skills our parents never taught us. I have options. I can finish college without taking anything from my sister." Judge Wilson nodded. "Thank you, Miss Collins." Then she turned back to the courtroom. Having reviewed all evidence and testimony in this matter, she began. "I find the plaintiff's claim entirely without merit. There is no legal basis for forcing an adult child to pay for a sibling's education, no matter how compelling the moral argument may seem. The facts clearly show that Miss Amanda Collins has already provided significant financial support to her family over the years, far more than any court would reasonably expect." She then addressed my parents directly. "Mr. and Mrs. Collins, this court is deeply concerned by the disparity in how you have treated your daughters. You appear to have expected complete financial independence from one, while assuming continual financial support from the other. That is not a matter for the law to fix, but for family counseling to address." Finally, the judge dismissed the case, but she wasn't done. "In addition," she said firmly, "given the frivolous and vexatious nature of this lawsuit, I am ordering the plaintiffs to pay the defendants' legal fees." As the courtroom began to clear, I remained seated, overwhelmed by the finality of what had just happened. The lawsuit was over, but the emotional weight of it all lingered. My parents left the courtroom without a word, their backs stiff, their pace quick. They didn't look at me. They didn't say goodbye. Emma stayed behind. She approached slowly, cautiously. "Amanda, I'm so sorry about all of this." "It's not your fault," I said quietly. "Can we talk? Maybe get coffee sometime?" I nodded, not trusting myself to say more. Whatever was going to happen between us going forward, nothing would ever be the same again. The lawsuit had forced a confrontation with decades of dysfunction. Things that had once been whispered or brushed aside were now part of the public record. As Linda gathered our documents, she looked at me and said gently, "Family estrangement is painful, Amanda, but sometimes it's necessary for healing to begin. Today, you legally affirmed your right to have boundaries. That's an important step." Walking out of the courthouse, I felt a complex wave of emotions, vindication, grief, and, to my surprise, a flicker of hope. I had stood up for myself, publicly, firmly, and though it hurt deeply, it felt like a turning point. The days that followed passed in a blur, relief that I wouldn't lose my home, sadness over the state of my family. I took a week off from work to decompress. I stayed home, cooked simple meals, planted flowers in the yard. The house that had become a battleground now began to feel like a sanctuary again. I didn't hear from my parents, and I didn't expect to. The courtroom had only made explicit what had been true for years. Our relationship wasn't built on love. It was built on obligation, guilt, and control. The lawsuit didn't create that truth. It just exposed it. I kept going to therapy with Dr. Russell. She told me something that stayed with me. Grieving a relationship that never truly existed is still grief. You're mourning the parents you deserved, but never had. And that loss is real. Together, we worked on internal boundaries, the kind that protect your emotional space. I started learning to recognize the voice of guilt when it tried to creep in, the one that said I was selfish for having needs, that I owed people simply because they shared my last name. 2 weeks after the hearing, Emma and I met for coffee. We chose a small cafe in a neutral part of town. The conversation was stiff at first. Years of complicated family dynamics hung between us like fog. After a few minutes of small talk, she looked up and said, "I moved out. I'm staying with my friend Sophia for now." "Are you still in school?" I asked. She nodded. "I cut my course load and got a job at the campus bookstore. It'll take longer to graduate, but I'll get there. I also applied for more scholarships, just like you suggested." "I'm proud of you," I said. And I meant it. Taking control of your own path? That's not easy. "I had a good example," she replied, meeting my eyes. That one sentence meant more to me than she could possibly know. That conversation was the start of something new between us. A relationship built not on obligation or comparison, but on mutual respect. In the months that followed, Emma began to share more of her life with me, her goals, her struggles, her little victories. She no longer sounded like the favored child. She sounded like a young woman figuring it out for herself. And I finally felt free. I started making the house feel more like a home. I painted the walls, planted a vegetable garden, and slowly furnished each room with things that made me happy. Not just practical, but meaningful. Every choice was a reminder. I had earned this. Work provided stability too. Michael, who had been supportive through the whole ordeal, offered me a leadership opportunity. I took on more responsibility, and it led to another promotion. The raise allowed me to start a modest investment account, another step toward long-term security. Jessica remained my rock. She showed up with snacks, helped me hang curtains, and listened when I had setbacks. One Saturday, while helping me install kitchen shelves, she said, "You know what amazes me most about you? You still have joy. You never became bitter." Her words caught me off guard, but she was right. I had survived a deeply painful chapter, and somehow I still laughed, still cared, still believed in building something better. Inspired by my own journey, I started a blog about financial independence, specifically for young adults from difficult or unsupportive family backgrounds. What began as a personal outlet quickly grew into something more. Within weeks, I received hundreds of comments from people who had gone through similar experiences, paying rent to their parents as teens, being guilted into supporting siblings, sacrificing their futures to meet family expectations. I wasn't alone. Soon, the blog evolved into a small online community. We hosted monthly video chats, shared templates for budgeting and scholarship applications, and created guides for setting boundaries, financial and emotional. It became a space where people could talk openly about things they had always been told to stay silent about. A space where being selfish meant choosing healing, growth, and stability. The sense of connection was healing in a way I hadn't expected. For so long, I had thought my story was rare, even shameful. But now it felt powerful, useful, even hopeful. Through these conversations, I learned just how many people had been told that love is something you earn through sacrifice, that financial dependence equals family loyalty, and I realized how important it was to offer a different message. You are allowed to build your own life. You are allowed to protect it. About 6 months after the court case, a handwritten letter arrived in my mailbox. The return address was my parents'. I didn't open it right away. I let it sit on the kitchen counter for 3 days before I finally found the courage to read it. "Amanda," it began, "the past few months have given me time to reflect on our relationship and my role as your mother." She continued, acknowledging that while she still believed families should support each other, she also realized they had placed unfair burdens on me from a very young age. Reading her words stirred a mix of emotions. The letter wasn't a full apology. She didn't take complete responsibility, but it was a step. She asked if we could meet, not to go back to the way things were, but to try and heal the family. I brought the letter to therapy. Dr. Russell read it carefully. "This sounds like someone starting to face the truth," she said. "But it's okay to be cautious. Rebuilding doesn't mean returning. You decide what this relationship looks like, if anything." Eventually, I agreed to meet my mother. We chose a cafe near my office, a neutral public place. I arrived first, scanning the room with a nervous heart. When she walked in, we exchanged polite greetings. We talked mostly about surface things, weather, work, Emma's school. Then, near the end of the conversation, she looked at me and said, "Your father still thinks we were right, but I miss having you in my life." I took a deep breath. I can't go back to the old dynamic, I said. If we're going to have any kind of relationship moving forward, it has to be built on mutual respect, not obligation. She nodded slowly. I'm not sure what that looks like, but I'd like to try. And so we did. Our new relationship was cautious, limited. We met for coffee once every few months, spoke only about neutral topics. There were still moments of awkwardness, of unresolved tension. But there was also something new, boundaries. My father, however, stayed distant. He never acknowledged the pain or the lawsuit, but at least he stopped the active hostility. One year after I bought my house, I hosted a small anniversary gathering. Emma came, bringing her new boyfriend and a homemade cake. Jessica and Tyler were there. A few colleagues who had supported me during the court battle joined too. My mother declined the invitation but sent a polite note. As I looked around the room that night at people who had chosen to be in my life because they valued me, not because they expected anything, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Family was not merely biological connection or obligation. It was the community you built, through trust, care, and mutual respect. That realization reshaped everything for me. The house that once felt like a source of conflict now felt entirely mine. Not just legally, but emotionally. Each mortgage payment became a quiet affirmation. This is mine, and I earned it. Every time I repainted a wall or added a new piece of furniture, it was a declaration. I had the right to create safety and stability for myself. And perhaps the most valuable lesson of all, the one I had to learn the hard way, was this. There's a difference between guilt and responsibility. For years, I had lived under the weight of guilt. Guilt for not being able to give more. Guilt for setting limits. Guilt for saying no. But through therapy, experience, and the unwavering support of a few good people, I had learned the truth. Being responsible for yourself isn't selfish. It's survival. Setting boundaries isn't cruelty. It's clarity. Boundaries are not walls. They're definitions. They mark where one person ends and another begins. And while I still had moments of sadness, of mourning the family I never really had, those moments became fewer, softer, less consuming. They were no longer controlling my choices. As I stood in my kitchen one quiet morning, preparing breakfast before work, I looked around the space I had built with my own two hands. The cabinets I had painted, the chair Jessica helped me put together, the small herb garden by the window. Everything in this space was a reflection of a life I had chosen. Not inherited, not assigned, but intentionally created. I realized then that freedom doesn't come from outside approval or even reconciliation. It comes from knowing who you are and giving yourself permission to live accordingly. My parents might never fully understand my decisions. They might never accept my boundaries. But their acceptance is no longer required for my peace. This house is more than just wood, brick, and drywall. It's a monument to a long, painful, and deeply personal journey. A journey through abandonment, self-doubt, over-responsibility, and ultimately, self-respect. It represents the right to build a life on my own terms. And the best part? I'm not alone anymore. Emma and I are rebuilding our bond slowly, thoughtfully. She's forging her own future, with her own voice. Jessica remains my compass, reminding me that joy doesn't require perfection. And through the blog, I continue to hear from people walking their own difficult paths toward independence and healing. Each message, each story shared in the comments or community chats, reminds me that we are not as alone as we think we are, and that sometimes the family we build, by choice, is more nurturing than the one we were born into. So now I ask you, what would you do if faced with a choice between family expectations and your own well-being? Have you ever had to set hard boundaries with people you love? If this story resonates with you, please share your thoughts in the comments, like, subscribe, and pass it on to someone else who might need to hear this. Because standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Thank you for listening, take care, and good luck.